Good morning. I'm Nancy Hirschadder. I'm your coordinator for this morning. I've been a member since about 2009, and I'm delighted to be here this morning. Announcements. We have a number of them today. Women's group will start meeting again on Thursday, the 28th at 2 p.m. in the Fellowship Hall, lower level. Jane Leff will be our facilitator. It will be wonderful to be together again. Please email her. The email for Jane is in your order of service if you're planning to come. Then there's a sound panels meeting on Thursday the 28th at 7 on Zoom. That is where Zoom meetings occur. For the link, please email Margaret. And in that meeting, we'll find out more about the proposal to install sound panels in Fellowship Hall and improve the sound. Come to one or the other. Keith Henderson will show a short PowerPoint with a mock-up of how the panels will look. This is the time for questions and discussion. And then we will vote on October 8th, which that meeting will be very brief. Friday, September 29th, this coming Friday, during the Jewish festival of Sukkot, Neighboring Faiths is warmly invited to join congregants from United Jewish Center on Deer Hill Avenue for services at 7, followed by decorating the sukkah, which represents the shelters that the Jews built during their years of wandering in the desert. And Neighboring Faiths, by the way, welcomes not just children, but every member of this congregation is welcome to join. You can read more about that in your order of service and RSVP to Sierra Marie if you would like to come. On Sunday, October 1st, Reverend Tony will lead the service on Principles to Promises, reflecting on reframing our tradition, moving from 7 principles to promises about how we will live our values. Okay. And today, we welcome Ed Edelson as our service presenter. Ed is a former first selectman of Southbury. Mr. Edelson was instrumental in making a documentary about the event, oh goodness, there's a paragraph missing. Okay, so he will tell you more about what happened in Southbury in 1937. He made a documentary about that event. And his children's book, Lois's Story, A Young Girl's Inspiration Helps Stop Hate and Fear, tells that story from the perspective of Reverend Lindsay's daughter. Mr. Edelson remains a resident of Southbury, where he is a member of the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society. Okay. And choir, we have a rehearsal at 11:45 today. Those are our announcements. And now, rise as you are able and join us in our hymn of welcome, number 348. We did not distribute hymnals because the words will be on the screen. Rise as you are able and join Jeff. Please join me in the words for lighting our chalice. The words are in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life. I should not be playing the lottery today. There. And now, please, Fiera Marie.
Sometimes lights take a little more work to kindle, and sometimes we also have to coordinate with one another. Let's say together our children's affirmation. We are going to put up 2 U's to start, 2 U's in the air. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. And this morning, our guest, Ed, you know what I found out earlier this week, is that Ed wrote a book for kids, but it's a little long to read. So instead, he's going to share a little something about some little pieces from his book.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sierra Marie, and thank you all for inviting me today. So I thought I'd begin, I didn't know I'd be over there too. I'd like to begin with a short video clip of a Southbury woman named Jenny Hinman speaking at a town meeting in 1937. So if we could roll the clip. Okay. One more.
Mr. Chairman, 2 of my great-great-grandfathers and 4 of my great-grandfathers fought for liberty. So did the other people of this town. I call upon all of you here to keep the Nazis out.
So when I first saw that clip, I was thinking to myself, what is this woman talking about in 1937? And why did she see this group that she called the Nazis as a threat to our country? And where was she when she spoke these words? Well, in today's homily, I will be talking more about this story and the importance of people like Jenny Hinman in 1937. But for right now, the important point of this story is that people in a town close to here, called Southbury, were confronted with a group of people who wanted to bring to their community a way of thinking, a way of life that was based on hate and fear of other people. They tried to force this upon the community in a way that we might all recognize today as bullying. A few years ago, I teamed up with a Danbury artist to create an illustrated book to tell the story of what happened in 1937 through the eyes of the 10-year-old daughter of a prominent minister in Southbury at that time. Lois is actually a real person. And that's the cover of the book. I brought a few copies if anybody's interested in buying one or looking at them. They're at the back table. Now, in our school district, which we call Region 15, one teacher took this book and introduced it into the 4th grade classes, where they read a chapter a day for 5 days and discussed the relevance to their own lives, especially about dealing with bullies. And as an author, that was pretty exciting to hear. Later in the year, I went to a Region 15 presentation on their diversity, equity, and inclusion program and found out that part of that program was a reference to my book. I didn't know that was going to happen. So I was very proud to see my book used in the classroom in such an important way. And I don't know if you can read it there, but it's about How can local history be used to engage students in practicing informed action? I wonder if any of you have to deal with bullies at school. I think some of the children here might be a little younger to have experienced that yet, but I think some of the adults have clearly recognized remember being bullied or seeing bullies in the playground or at school, or let's be honest, at work. They're all around us. So it's not an easy subject to talk about in terms of how do you deal with bullies, but it's something we need to deal with. Now, one student took it another step, and she decided she wanted to do something in the spirit of Lois. And she approached her teacher and her principal, and she explained that she wanted to start a new club in their school. She called it the Upstander Club. And the principal supported her, and she rallied almost all of the fourth graders to become members of the Upstander Club. And they meet to discuss how do we address bullying. They've used the internet to put guidelines together. Some of those are shown on the slide that they created on the left side about guidelines on how to deal with a bully. And they came up with a pledge. And I don't know how well you can read it on the right side of the screen, but the pledge I find to be both so simple but so profound. And the pledge reads, I pledge to be an upstander. When I see something wrong, wrong happening to someone, I will say something or help in any way I can. How about that? How about if we all said that every morning before we went off to do what we need to do? So I'm wondering if you can help me say it together. I'll read it one more time, and then by then you'll have it memorized. So pay attention. I pledge to be an upstander. When I see something wrong happening to someone, I will say something or help in any way I can. Are you ready? All right. I pledge to be an upstander. When I see something wrong happening to someone, I will say something or help in any way I can. Well, congratulations. You're all members of the Upstanders Club, and you'll be getting your little cards in the mail pretty soon. So I hope people will take this pledge seriously. I'm very proud of the young lady who came up with this, and I hope that it continues to be not only a club in our schools, but other schools around the country. Thank you.
Okay, and I want to invite any of the kids who are going to go to programs this morning to come with me, follow me down the stairs. We'll all go together while we sing This Little Light of Mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
It's now time for our spoken and silent milestones. We'll start with silent milestones. If you have a joy or sorrow that's lifting you up or weighing you down that you would like to express by putting a stone in the bowl, you may do so now.
free. Spirit of light, come to me, come to me.
As we prepared for the premiere of the documentary Home of the Brave, When Southbury Said No to the Nazis, back in November of 2012, there was a display of artifacts at the Southbury Historical Society Museum. I had not actually gone to see it. I was busy with many other things. But I received a call from a well-respected doctor in Southbury. He had just read the resolution I'm about to read to you that was approved unanimously at a town meeting attended by an estimated 400 citizens. That's where you saw Jenny Hemman speak. He said reading it brought him to tears, and he wanted to be sure I read it to the audience of 1,000 people who would attend the premiere the following day. And this resolution is in your order of service as an insert. We, the people of the town of Southbury, Connecticut, citizens of the United States of America, in mass meeting assembled after calm and careful deliberation, find that whereas there has recently been purchased a trust of land within our township for the avowed purpose of using same for a recreating and concentration camp of Nazi American use. And whereas from documentary evidence and other good and sufficient reasons, we believe these camps to be governed and directed by a foreign government inimical to our continuance as a democracy. And whereas in furtherance of their designs against our national unity and sovereignty of the agents of this foreign government are teaching these youths the philosophy of Nazism, drilling them in Nazi German military tactics with the express purpose of dominating our national affairs to the profit of Nazism and Germany. And whereas these activities can only be construed as unfriendly acts of conspiracy and invasion, therefore be it resolved that we, the citizens of Southbury, secure in the liberties and privileges bequeathed us by our fathers, and sincerely determined to hand these precious heritage to our children, do hereby petition and pray the President of the United States, the Senate, the representative in Congress, and the governor of our state to employ the power vested in them to abate, dispel, and destroy this menace in our constituted government. In witness of the sincerity of our purpose and determination to protect our government against the insidious attacks of alien forces, we hereby attach our signatures this 23rd day of November, 1937.
It's now time for our congregational offering. If you're with us for the first time, your presence here, virtual or actual, is your gift to us. Members who are gathered here in Fellowship Hall, please express your generosity as our greeters circulate the donation basket. If you are here for the first time or second time, feel free to let the basket go. Your presence here is your gift to us. Those online may click a link posted in the chat to make a donation or pledge. You may also mail a check to UUCD at 24 Clapboard Ridge Road in Danbury, 06811. As we create this holy place together, thank you each for doing your part to support and sustain this community that we love.
So if I was quicker on my feet, I would have finished my little statement there about Jeremy and said he's a true upstander. That would have been a good segue there. But anyway, so good morning, and thank you again for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts about the importance of what happened in Southbury, Connecticut in November of 1937. But just to get a little sense of the audience here, how many before this morning knew of the organization called the German American Bund, that you'd heard about it and knew about its presence? Okay. And how many, I think I know the answer to this one already. How many of you have seen the documentary Home of the Brave, when Southbury said no to the Nazis? Even fewer. Okay. And how many of you have heard of the House on Un-American Affairs Activity Committee? Okay. Did you know that initially it was focused on investigating the German American Bund and other Nazi organizations before it focused on communism? No. I'm with all of you about 10 years ago. That's where I was. So given that response, let me start out with a brief summary of what happened in Southbury back in the fall of 1937. Now, many of you know that Adolf Hitler and his political party, Nazis, or National Socialist German Workers' Party, was an outgrowth of the economic problems in post-World War I Germany. Hitler's power grew, and in 1933, he became the chancellor or the head of the German government. In the United States, many different organizations and prominent people began to think that Hitler had the right idea about governance, the need for a strong leader. One such organization was the German American Bund. The word Bund is just a German word for group, so there's nothing nefarious in the title, just with what they did. But this group was a follower of the New Germany, Hitler's Germany. They took over the operation of up to 24 German American cultural clubs that were located in many parts of the United States, although predominantly in the Northeast, but that's where most people lived back in the 1930s here in the United States. Now, instead of celebrating German culture of the past, they were worshiping the ways of Hitler. The organization grew pretty dramatically under the leadership of a German-born but U.S. citizen named Fritz Kuhn. In September of 1937, a member of the group, who was from Stamford, Connecticut, bought 175 acres of land in Southbury. Although purchased in his own name, it soon became clear that he was just a front man for the Bund so as not to raise suspicion. In early November, representatives of this group, the German American Bund, including Fritz Kuhn, came to Southbury to convince the civic and religious leadership that this proposed project that they called Camp von Steuben would be a great idea for Southbury. Camp von Steuben was designed to house 1,000 people and support rallies of up to 10,000. At that time, Southbury had a train station or train connection to New York City. So that's the people going in this camp were not going to come from Southbury. Population of Southbury was probably less than 2,000 people. So this would have been very overwhelming. But that's where the people would come for these rallies and to attend the camp. The Bund leadership expected that the town would see the economic benefit of this activity. There would be jobs for the people, both in constructing the camp, maintaining the camp, and being an agricultural community, this would be a great outlet to sell all of their agricultural products. Given the Depression, the economic gains had trumped any concern that other communities might have had about the doctrine of Nazism and therefore supported the camp. But the leaders in Southbury did not see it that way. They organized town meetings in late November 1937. These were very well-attended meetings of several hundred citizens. And for those of you who attended town meetings, you know, if you get 20, it's like, hallelujah. And that is where Ginny Hinman spoke out, the video clip I shared during Time for All Ages. The agenda for one meeting was to vote on forming a zoning committee with the purpose of developing a set of zoning ordinances. There was no zoning at that time in Southbury, and it was a controversial idea. The agenda for the second meeting was to vote on the resolution to petition the president and the government regarding the threat of Nazism that I read to you just before. No other government in the United States was taking such a democratic action comparable to Southbury at that time. About 3 weeks later, the zoning committee returned with proposed ordinance and which were approved at another town meeting. Nothing since has happened that quickly in Southbury. For reasons never stated explicitly, the German-American Bund decided not to pursue the building of Camp von Steuben after the zoning ordinance were put in place. So if we can go to the next slide. So that's the thumbnail sketch. This is a poster that the filmmaker Scott Sniffen made at the time the premiere was scheduled. It's a bit over the top. I mean, if you watch the movie, you're not going to see a scene like that, but he had a good time with the graphics. But the question on the left is correct. If hate, prejudice, and evil came to your town, what would you do? And that is the fundamental question. For those of you not seen seen the documentary produced for the 75th anniversary, I encourage you to watch it. Until about a year ago, you could only watch it if you purchased a DVD or someone like me came to show you the film. This was due to copyright issues, including that clip of Jenny Hinman. We needed copyrights to show that in order to put it out on the World Wide Web. Back in those days, the clip was owned by HBO, and they told us $50,000 would be a reasonable number to have access to about 2 minutes of video. We did not have $50,000. But recently things have changed, and now it is available on the internet. And there's a link in your order of service to southbury-ct.org/1937, where you'll find links to the documentaries that were produced, many webinars that have been done since then, as well as teaching materials that go along with my book, Lois's Story. So a lot of resources there at that website. When I would show the documentary, I would encourage the audience to consider 3 questions. First was, why was the town of Southbury the only government to take such concerted democratic action? Second, if you had lived in Southbury in 1937, how would you have voted at that town meeting? And third, if a group similar to the German-American Bund came to your town today, how would you like to see your town respond? Well, that was useful before 2017, when the threat of fascism was low. The reaction of most groups when I presented was a mix of sort of fascination that something like the German-American Bund existed, and questioning why had they never heard of them before? Why was this news to them? However, since 2017, the threat of neo-Nazi fascist organizations have become much more top of mind in our country, as well as throughout the world. To quote the old philosopher Yogi Berra, it's just like deja vu all over again. Now the reaction is how similar the situation that was happening in the United States and the world in the 1930s is happening today. Now, just to be clear, when I began working on this project in 2011 with Rabbi Eric Polikoff of B'nai Israel Synagogue and Reverend Shannon Wall of the South Britain Congregational Church to create the documentary, we were not trying to make any political statement. The 3 of us had become fascinated with the story and wanted to bring it to more people's attention in Southbury. Very, very few people in Southbury knew of this story. We wanted to capture any oral history we could before it was too late, and we thought it would make a great tool for teaching local history in our school system. One thing I did in 2013 was to take a copy of the documentary to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. From prior research when we were putting the documentary together, I knew that they knew nothing about this story. They were as ignorant as just about everybody else. Their initial reaction was that the museum is focused on the Holocaust, which happened in Europe and not in the United States. Well, that made sense. But they also said that recently there had been some initial discussions about designing a new special exhibit to highlight what was going on in the United States at the time that when Nazism was spreading across Europe until its demise. And if that proceeded with such a special exhibit, maybe the Southbury story might fit in. Well, that was a little ray of hope, but not much, because then they told me it takes 5 years to put such an exhibit together. And I wasn't sure where I would be in 5 years. Well, 5 years came and went, and in April of 2018, they opened the special exhibit. The most obvious thing that it changed, I'm sorry, got out of order there. By the time the special exhibit opened in April 2018, a lot had changed. The most obvious was the president's presence of representatives of the so-called alt-right in the White House, including Steve Bannon and Sebastian Gorka. Also chilling was the march in Charlottesville, Virginia, Unite the Right rally. Many of you know that our UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, was a prominent participant in the counter demonstrations that happened there. The exhibit at the museum was to be called America and the Nazis. However, it was changed at the last minute to be called America and the Holocaust, so as not to encourage any violence at the museum by that word Nazi and attracting pro-Nazi people to come. But frankly, it is a misnomer. It is about Nazism in America. And if we can go to the next slide. Now, the gratifying news to me was that the Southbury story played a very large role in the exhibit, which covers the years 1933, when Hitler came to power, until 1945. When I say a very large role, physically, if you think about a museum exhibit, it's real estate. It's 5,000 square foot of information. And we've got a very large footprint compared to almost any other story. So that's what I mean by big. This photo is of me standing next to what's become sort of an iconic photograph in Southbury of two Southburyan protesters from 1937. And they took this picture, which originally was just like in a newspaper about this big, and they blew it up, as you can see, to be bigger than me. I was a few inches taller back in 2018, so, but not that much bigger. As the curator, Rebecca Erbelding, told me, they saw Southbury as being an important pivotal point for when our nation went from being aware of Nazism, but only as a curiosity of what was happening in Europe. Then we began, after 1937, 1938, we began to see it as an ominous threat to our way of life. By the way, it was while leaving that exhibit and going through the bookstore that I had this idea, a little epiphany, that what we needed, in addition to the documentary, was a children's story, because there were so many good lessons for children that they would not get from watching the documentary, which is obviously much more adult-oriented. The response to this museum exhibit was pretty extraordinary from my point of view. This was an editorial in the Washington Post about it. I'm not aware of that many editorials for opening of museum exhibits. And it states in there, the exhibit raises disturbing and complex questions about the years leading up to the killing of 6 million Jews and others in the Nazi camps. The answers resonate today. And I kind of like either the subtitle, or I'm sorry, the title, How Would We Answer Today? Because that's what I had been trying to use the documentary to say for all those years before. In addition to the exhibit, there is much more reporting about what was happening in the 1930s regarding the Nazi organization. Again, a lot of this seems not to have been taught in my history classes, maybe, and I don't think yours either. Rachel Maddow's podcast, Ultra, is one great example, as she traces how the Germans infiltrated our Congress to promote Nazi propaganda through mail sent out by senators and representatives. These senators and representatives were literally sending mail using what we call the franking system, using their free postage, letters that were written in Berlin. They had become part of the propaganda. She also documents efforts by the ultra-right to try to overthrow the U.S. government and the failed effort to prosecute them. But they were prosecuted, but the trials never completed. Much of this was forgotten when the war broke out, and I think people wanted to just put it in the rearview mirror. For me, all of this new information about the 1930s changed how I looked at our documentary, and I began to show it more often after 2018 and focus more on the lessons for what we need to do today. In addition, other people began to talk about the Southbury story. Students are doing their master's thesis on this once obscure story, and using our documentary as their gateway to learning about what went on. When the curator that I mentioned before, Rebecca Belding, talks to groups, she will compare what happened to other towns like Yaphank, Long Island, versus Southbury. Yaphank was the home of Camp Siegfried. Some of you may have read the article in 2018 in the New York Times, which revealed that property deeds still had restrictions that said homes in Yaphank could only be resold to people of the Aryan race. That's how invested the community was in the Nazi philosophy back in the 30s, but it's still, and I'm not saying people were obeying those deeds. Nobody reads those things, but they were still legacies that were still there. So it was different in Southbury. And one reason was the church, or more specifically, the two congregational ministers of the two largest denominations in Southbury at that time. For them, standing up to the German America Bund was a question of morality. The introduction to Reverend Lindsay's sermon reads as follows. I propose to show that the Bible describes for us the nature of an antichrist. I propose to demonstrate that the Nazi movement in practice fulfills the designation. I shall argue that the connection between the German-American Bund is such as to warrant the claim that it is a Nazi movement. I shall remind you that the same Bund proposes to establish within our town a camp similar to those established elsewhere, which are but a replica of those established in Germany by Hitler in the early days of the Nazi movement. I shall claim these camps are therefore undesirable. First, because they are unchristian. Second, because they are un-American. And third, because they are pro-Nazi. Now, as we might be a little bit uncomfortable with some of this language, but the message from Reverend Lindsay is pretty clear to me. What the Nazis were selling, we should not be buying. And I would like to think that as a UU, we would use our principles to see that whether it's the German-American Bund in 1937 or the Proud Boys in 2023, what they are selling, we should not be buying. Why? Because of the principles that are fundamental to our faith, especially the first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Nazis believe that some people are superior to others. And principle 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Nazis believe in the leadership principle. Whoever is the leader or Führer decides what is just, what is equitable, and what is compassionate. Acceptance of one another. Nazis believe that only applies to those in the superior group. And number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Nazis believe that the leader determines what is true and what is meaningful, and there is no need for anyone else to search. And number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Nazis see no need for a personal conscience or a democratic process, as it is all about the state. And finally, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Well, Nazis do believe in this as long as they're in charge. Maybe that's why when people talk about anti-fascists or Antifa, I'm the first to say, where can I sign up for such an organization? And that's one reason I find that because I know this story about Southbury, I feel I have a responsibility, grounded in my faith tradition, to tell as many people as I can about it. Last year at about this time, we celebrated the 85th anniversary of when Southbury said no. And we had a proclamation presented to us by our representative, your representative also, Johanna Hayes. And there are copies of this in the program book, and I have some copies on the back there. So if you want to read the whole thing, unless you've got great vision, it's in the front cover, because I think she did a wonderful job of putting that proclamation together. But I would like to read the, if you will, the whereas. We can go to the next screen, maybe you can follow along. Now, therefore, I, Johanna Hayes, Congresswoman of Connecticut's 5th District, hereby proclaim the town of Southbury to be a shining example of unity and resolve for the state of Connecticut. It is with pride that I honor the steadfast commitment by the townspeople of Southbury to reject Nazi ideology 85 years ago. May this legacy of community strength continue to be shared and celebrated for generations to come. So I hope if you have a chance on that back table, you take a look at that. And but I think I'll give the final word to our senator, Chris Murphy, who is another fan of this story.
Hey everyone, this is U.S. Senator Chris Murphy. I am so proud of all of my friends in Southbury for this incredibly important moment in Connecticut history, in Southbury history, and frankly, American history. Thank you to my friend, Rabbi Polikoff, for doing the work of bringing this story to light and reminding us here in Connecticut the leadership role that we played almost a century ago in making sure that our state did not provide any safe harbor for Nazis. That message is really important today because we see anti-Semitism, attacks on Jews, proliferating all over the country, throughout our state. And this is a moment at which we have to stand up, remember what we have done in the line in the sand, and challenge our fellow citizens to do the same thing right now. Anti-Semitism has never gone away. There may be periods of time in which it is, but unfortunately, especially over the last half decade in America, it has bubbled back up to the surface with key political and cultural figures far too easily trading in anti-Semitic hate language. So thank you for reminding us what the people of Southbury did. The citizens stood up, regardless of political orientation or ideology. The people of Southbury came together and said no to this camp that was going to be located inside Connecticut, with which to try to propagate the message of Nazism and anti-Semitism all around the country. Southbury did something really important, and it's a reminder of what individual citizens can do to make a difference. Hopefully that message is going to be heard loud and clear today when we need to hear it so badly. Thank you, Rabbi Polikoff.
Well, I think you got most of that. I don't know what happened. We didn't try to bleep out his words. I would never do that. Thank you again for listening. I have also on the back table, if you want to be a supporter, we have these wristbands that basically say when Southbury said no to the Nazis. So if you want to show your solidarity, feel free to take one. And if you're interested in the book, just let me know. And again, thank you for your time.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing our flame, and Todd Zagoric will actually do the extinguishing. Thank you. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. And please rise as you are able for hymn number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. Words on the screen.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die. We dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time. love, and we have found the time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is the answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories that we share with friends, they will linger on and on. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a place to live together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that peace beneath the living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found our joy being together. And in our search for peace, may we will finally see, even to question truth is an answer.
So I thought on Thursday that I was done with this talk and I could put it to bed. But then I read a new article in Foreign Affairs magazine that made the Southbury story even more relevant. It was entitled America's Hatred Goes Global. And it pointed out the impact of domestic neo-Nazi groups are being recognized by other countries like Canada as threats to their own country. The U.S. lists foreign terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, but other countries are listing groups like the Proud Boys and other U.S.-based neo-Nazi organizations as foreign terrorist groups. The threat is here and is now again. How will we respond? Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to meeting with many of you after the service. Now do I say, I lost my notes.
And take a moment to greet those around you. Reverend Tony preferred that we leave that for the end. So greet with those around you and then bring your greeting to coffee. Thank you. This concludes our service.